When League was first being conceptualized back in 2009, to round out the champion pool, the central goal was to flesh out the roster by checking off as many different boxes as one could think of, and going by the more archetypal approach to character design throughout the video gaming industry during the early 2000s, the original 40 or so were about as predictable as they came. You had the super armor-focused tank like Malphite, the werewolf who attacked really quickly and healed a bunch like Warwick, the hook champion Blitzcrank, so on and so forth. One design that you saw in almost every character or class-based game was the stance changer, denoting someone who can alternate between different modes that affected their current properties. It's a popular video game trope for a reason. A lot of skill expression can be found in manipulating one's attributes. Udyr was intended to fill that role, being the stance changer of League of Legends. But throughout history, despite being a rather simple guy to pick up and play, he's always had a hard time finding consistent use, even in lower elo where you'd expect a straightforward champion to be popular. Udyr was actually one of the first Why No One Plays episodes I made way back in 2020 before my League content took off, and despite a very nice visual gameplay update modernizing his appearance and abilities, Udyr still hasn't been able to find a stable presence in the metagame beyond the initial spike after he got reworked. So for today I wanted to remake the Why No One Plays Udyr video, this time accounting for the new version to see what changed, or rather didn't change, that still makes him an unpopular pick today. Despite the appealing premise of alternating between different stances, characters belonging to this archetype can be extremely hit or miss in the realm of popularity, leaning more on the side of miss. Though a completely different game, over in Smash Ultimate, since I made content on that on Vars 3, an unpopular character in that game is Shulk, who similarly has an ability that alters his properties around. For example, he has a mode that makes him super tanky but causes him to lose all his damage and mobility, and a mode that jacks up his damage and kill power to an extreme amount in exchange for making him explode easily too. The reasons behind Udyr's lack of popularity are not too different from the reasons affecting Shulk, and that actually brings to light the first of three main factors responsible for Udyr having trouble picking up a decent player base, despite being a very easy champion to understand. Stance changers deal with a unique balancing dilemma. On one hand, they carry a significant advantage when it comes to adaptation in that their various modes offer a solution to multiple different circumstances, which initially would lead you to believe they'd be selected rather often by virtue of handling a lot of different things. On paper, that may appear true, but in practice, they can only ever partially respond to a situation, not fully respond to it. In simple terms, Udyr's jack-of-all-trades nature holds him back from ever being an optimal choice for anything. There's an issue he's had to deal with for his entire career, both pre- and post-update. You find yourself only ever really taking full advantage of a portion of his kit, never all of it. Udyr, like all stance changers, faced a challenge endemic only really to them, opportunity cost. Switching between his Q to W to E to R give him a new set of properties and attacks, in exchange for his current one, meaning at any point in time you're only really able to capitalize on one part of his kit, whereas the majority of other champions in the game can tap into all aspects of their kit simultaneously if and when the need arises. In a way, his situation closely resembles that of transformation champs like Nidalee, Jace, Elise, and whatnot, where the cost of having two sets of abilities is that each set carries worse total output, placing the onus on the player to alternate between the two to squeeze out as much value as possible for a better end result. For the sake of argument, Elise's human form is only 75% of her regular champion. Likewise, her spider form is also only 75% of her regular champion. By putting them together, you could potentially achieve a stronger total than a champion with the basic Q, W, E, and ultimate formation, as evident by most if not all Transformers having a very strong early game. The problem with Udyr is that he takes that balancing dynamic to the extreme, having not two stances but four. Even worse is that he only gets one ability per stance. Functionally speaking, Udyr may be the only champion in the game who can never access the full strength of his kit, greatly limiting how much pressure he can apply at any given point in time despite having a versatile moveset conceptually speaking. Looking through his Q, W, E, and R, individually speaking, even at base, they're among the most powerful basic abilities in the entire game. Wild and Claw is one of the strongest auto-attack empowerments in the game. Your next two attacks do a ton of % max health damage and you get bonus attack speed and physical damage on hit. Almost every auto-attack champion would love to have an ability like this, especially considering the short cooldown and low mana cost. But his Q is the only ability in his kit that plays into that style. Apply that same stipulation to the other three abilities. Why that matters is, when you think of a specific role, their entire kit or most of it is often geared towards a certain win condition. For example, another auto-attacker like Warwick. His passive plays into auto-attack DPS, his Q plays into auto-attack DPS, his W plays into auto-attack DPS, and his ultimate plays into auto-attack DPS. Or another example being Malphite. Malphite's armor-focused playstyle is accentuated by all of his basic abilities. Shields are much more effective when bolstered by resistances. A 300 HP shield on a tank stacking full armor is way more durable than a 300 HP shield on Dr. Mundo, thereby making Granite Shield a bigger deal. Thunderclap and Ground Slam both have armor scaling, causing Malphite to deal more damage in addition to getting tankier. Then Ground Slam crippling enemy attack speed, and with the vast majority of attacks in this game being physical in nature, further strengthens Malphite's armor against them. Malphite fully commits to that playstyle, which is why he's so effective against AD champs. If we circle back to Udyr, none of his abilities have inherent synergy between each other. There might be unintentional synergy in the sense that Blazing Stampede can get you closer to your target to then auto-attack them, but Udyr is not a dedicated auto-attacking champ. By extension, he's not a dedicated tank, nor is he a dedicated crowd controller or a dedicated AP bruiser for that matter. His kit's split across 4 different purposes with almost no overlap between each other, making him a master of none. In light of this, to reiterate, each of his abilities are formatted to be individually stronger than that of abilities with a similar purpose, but even being twice the power is insufficient because one ability can only do so much. It can never be better than 3 or even 2 different abilities. Wilding Claw makes Jax's Empower look awful, but Empower isn't the only part of Jax's kit that plays into it. Empower plus the 3-hit passive on Grandmaster Smite plus the ramping attack speed on his passive become way stronger. What enables Jax to scale so well into the mid to late game is that his strength compounds. Udyr, however, does not. When building for a certain playstyle, only one part of his kit gets the benefit, with the others not gaining much else out of it beyond the regular stats. Building attack speed in AD doesn't make Iron Mantle, Blazing Stampede, or Wingborne Storm any more effective. Conversely, building AP doesn't play into Wilding Claw all that much. You often see Udyr players going full max into QWE or RWE, often ignoring the final ability. Granted, they've since made an effort to allow building AP to partially benefit his Q damage, but numbers aren't able to address the overarching problem that Udyr's only ever able to do part of something, causing others to overshadow him in dedicated roles. If you need a frontline base, Udyr can absolutely deliver on that. The sheer resilience and empowered W gives him is staggering, but Udyr will never be able to outface tank an actual frontline like Scion, Orin, Malphite, what have you. If you need someone who can do AP damage, Windborne Storm is one of the most overpowered abilities in the game. It makes Anivia's Glacial Storm look like a joke, but more often than not, Udyr will get out DPS'd by Mordekaiser in the long run. I think you get the point here. The only time a champion like Udyr outperforms the competition is if there's a situation demanding multiple hats to be worn on a single champion. At times, it may feel really convenient to have an Udyr on your team. The guy's a one-man DPS, engage, frontline, and lockdown all in one. But therein lies a universal thing diminishing the value of a jack of all trades. League's a team game, it's not 1v1, it's 5v5. Jacks of all trades are more appealing in games where it's just you versus someone else. Going back to Smash for a moment, Joker's a strong character because he has a little bit of everything, but in League, you don't really need a jack of all trades. Anything you might be lacking and your team can make up for it. That is the literal entire premise of bot lane and support. Bot laners can forego utility, crowd control, peel, and even mobility for pure damage, since there will be a partner who can cover for the aspects they're missing. There is no pragmatic incentive for a generalist like Udyr since you have 5 champions who can all build off each other. In almost every instance, it's better to just play a full DPS jungler like Master Yi, or a full tank like Zac, or a full hard engager like Hecarim, or a full AP exploder like Karthus, and then your teammates can make up for what you lack. That doesn't mean Udyr's ineffective, it's more that it's hard for a player to feel like they're excelling at anything, bringing us to problem number 2. Udyr is a walking balance nightmare. When it comes to balance, the more moving parts within a champion, the easier it is to adjust their power level without breaking the entire system. Taking away 5% of one part of Bel'Vet's ultimate is of far less consequence to her than taking away 5% of J4's passive is. Say you were able to take away 50 base damage on her AoE explosion from consuming a Void Coral, I guarantee you her win rate will stay the same. However, taking away 50 base damage on Jarvan's ultimate will completely ruin the champion because his ultimate is so integral to his burst and engage combo. Not to imply Endless Banquet isn't, it's just that Bel'Vet has so many more parts to her kit than J4 does. Once more, Udyr's that notion taken to the extreme. He's not a champion with one kit of 4 abilities, he's a champion with 4 kits of 1 ability each. Making a single adjustment to that one ability could lead to massive fluctuations in performance, for even though Udyr's supposed to be a jack of all trades, anytime he gets played, people usually zero in on one specific part of his kit, typically Wingborne Storm or Wilding Claw. If you were to nerf either part of Udyr, that champion will either become Thanos or found dead in a ditch. When he first got adjusted, Udyr was like Turbo Pick Ban because Wingborne Storm was just so overpowered of an ability that he could shred entire teams with only a Demonic Embrace and full tank. So they nerfed it, and then Udyr became complete ass, so then they tried to buff his Q to do max health damage even at base. But then you saw Prowler's Claw Halo Blaze Udyr completely ass-fucking people in the blink of an eye, doing like 80% max health damage in half a second. His abilities either do nothing or do too much, and that ability effectively represents the entire kit. Altering Udyr's numbers is a dangerous game since he depends so heavily on one singular ability. Any increase or decrease to that ability affects the entire champion, whereas on most other champions, a similar increase or decrease won't affect them all that much on account of them still having the other three. Again, it ties back to what I said earlier about Udyr's abilities being individually overpowered. That's because he only gets one. I mentioned how Wilding Claw is an overpowered auto attack empowerment at base. Now include the Awakened version. I know that Udyr's Awakened version is supposed to make up for not having a conventional ultimate, but let's go back to Wilding Claw. 40 to 150% bonus attack speed. Your next two auto attacks can deal a total of 24 base plus 14% per 100 bonus AD max health damage, and an additional 18 to 36% base plus 9.6% per 100 AP more max health damage on a single target. Do you realize how disgusting that is? But for the umpteenth time, it's counterbalanced by the fact that that's the only part of Udyr's kit that can play into that playstyle. Iron Metal and Blazing Stampede are just other buttons to press while waiting for his Q to come off cooldown. There is no other way to buff him for that purpose, since none of his other abilities directly synergize with his Q, and he can only ever be in one stance at a time anyway. The irony is that when Udyr got reworked, Riot wanted to update his kit to make him feel more versatile of a champion instead of just a walking stun bot like his old iteration was. What ended up actually happening was that Udyr became even more pigeonholed into putting all of his eggs into one basket. He's still very much a stat checker just like before, only now he's a stat checker with the potential to spiral out of control given how much more his abilities can do individually. His old Q Tiger stance had a similar issue of being way too overtuned for a single Q. That thing used to have like a 200% AP ratio, but it was to account for all of his other abilities being completely irrelevant to any of each other's win conditions. All in all, Udyr has a hard time making his way into the meta because he doesn't really feel that good to play. The most popular champions in League are those with a lot of agency, satisfying combos, and ideally high playmaking potential. Someone like Yasuo gets a ton of play because his E, Q, and ultimate have a multitude of ways to play into each other, and his passive and W are extremely conducive to a melee champion that can't really afford to build bruiser items, but has to expose himself to enemy pressure nonetheless. Udyr on the other hand doesn't have that same outplay factor. He can only realistically just walk up to something and press abilities twice. The presence of Awakened versions does well to add nuance to him compared to his past iteration in that you can treat him like a Rengar or Renekton with empowered abilities each with their own use cases, but the essential experience of Udyr has stayed the same. If anything, he's become more dependent on it due to his ultimate. Stance changers are meant to have a lot of skill expression by way of the player having to decide what mode to be in to best optimize their character's attributes, but for Udyr, it kind of just boils down to a linear, one-dimensional playstyle. You press C to run out to something, then stun them. Then you press Q or R twice depending on what build you're going, and then switch to W to tank enemy counterattacks before repeating the steps again. The novelty wears off pretty quickly. Then you have to factor in how the balance team has a hard time keeping Udyr in a healthy state because of how unorthodox his kit was designed, and how even a small buff to his Q or R can make him go from dealing 0 damage to too much damage. In the end, you get a champion with an exciting premise who really fails to make an impression on most people. I actually think a better way to design Udyr would be to go the Shulk approach in Smash, wherein his stance change is not attached to a singular ability, rather a change in properties. Give him a normal kit like everyone else, but have him choose between a damaging stance, a tanking stance, and maybe a speeding stance, with pros and cons to each of them. Like imagine Blue and Red Kayn with the same Q, W, E, and ultimate, but depending on what stance you're in, you get different properties. That in my opinion will lead to more skill expressive and engaging gameplay than what he is now. Alternatively, I wouldn't be opposed to going for an Aphelios type approach, different properties to his abilities based on what his primary and secondary stances are. That way, there can be some finesse to how you play him, whether you go QW, QE, EW, ER, etc. Different combinations and permutations of his stances. But anyways, what do you guys think of the current situation with Udyr? Do you agree or disagree with my points? And also, what are your thoughts on my suggestions on how to rework him? Let me know in the comments down below. That's it for today, so if you enjoyed the video, a like and subscribe would be much appreciated. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter @Vars, join my Discord server, and check out my other Why No One Plays episodes if you haven't yet. But till next time, thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.